Hi everyone, so today we're going to be talking about how to solve one-step equations. So one-step equations are any equation with a variable in it or a letter that we want to solve for, and it only takes one step to solve for that. So let's just get right into it with the first example. First example is x minus 8 equals 20. So when we solve these, there's a couple of different ways that we can solve them. The first way is that we could just guess and check. So we can start plugging numbers in for x and see if it works. And when I say works, I mean that the left side is equal to the right side. So for example, if I plug in 10 for x, does 10 minus 8 equal 20? Well, no, so 10 isn't right. So then keep on guessing and checking and guessing and checking until you get the right number. That way works only so well. So what we're going to do instead is solve it a little bit in a little bit of a better way. And this way will help us solve it even more complicated equations. So when we solve these equations, what we're going to do, the first step we want to take is draw a big line down the middle of the equal sign. The reason why we're doing that is because what we're going to do in this equation is move numbers from one side to the other side, but what I do to one side of the equal sign, I have to do to the other to keep the equality. And so that line just kind of keeps our work organized and makes sure that what I do to one side, I do to the other side. So then what we have to do is figure out what we need to move. In this case, we want to get x by itself, which means that we need to move the number that's on the same side as the 8, or sorry, the same side as the x, which in this case ends up being the 8. So we know we want to move the 8. The next step is to figure out what the 8 is doing to the x. Is it adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing the x? And in this case, it's subtracting the x. The reason why I know it's subtracting is because it's minus 8. So now that I know that it's subtracting from the x, what we need to do is do the opposite of that. So what's the opposite of subtracting? It's adding. So what I'm going to do is add 8 to that side. And because I did it to the left side, I also have to do it to the right side. So I'm going to say a plus 8 on both sides of this line. And I'm going to treat it kind of like a big addition problem. So on the left side, we have x minus 8 and then a plus 8. And this minus 8 and plus 8 cancel each other out because a negative 8 plus a positive 8 gives you 0. So what I'm going to do is just going to cross those out. And it just gives me x on this side. And then on the right side, we have a 20 plus 8, with 20 plus 8 is 28. And now, notice that the x is by itself on one side, and so you're actually done. My answer is x equals 28. So one step and we're done. All right, let's go on to another example. And this example is 10 plus y equals 7. So once again, we could guess and check to determine what y is, but we're going to do it the other way because it'll end up being easier in the long run, I promise. We're going to draw a line down the middle of the equal sign so we know what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. And then now we have to figure out what number we're moving. In this case, we're going to move the 10 because the 10 is on the same side as the variable or as the y. Now we have to figure out what the 10 is doing to the y. So is it adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing? In this case, because I see this plus sign right there, it clues me into the fact that it's adding to the y. So now what we have to do to get rid of it is do the opposite. What's the opposite of adding? It's subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 10 from each side. All right, and then we're going to treat it like a big addition problem. So on the left side, we've got 10 minus 10, and those two things cancel each other out, which means we're just left with y. Then on the right side, we have a 7 minus 10, and 7 minus 10 is negative 3, which means that's our answer. Okay, cool. Let's do another example. So this example is negative 3r equals 18. Okay, once again, first step, draw a line down the middle of the equal sign. Now what we're going to do, we have to get rid of this negative 3 because the negative 3 is on the same side as the r. Now, this is a little bit confusing because we're used to seeing this negative sign or this minus sign and saying, oh, because it's minus, we have to add. But in this case, the negative 3 is multiplying the r. The reason why I know it's multiplying the r is because the negative 3 and the r are right next to each other. There's no sign in between them. They're just stuck right next to each other. And when a number and a letter is stuck right next to each other like that, that means it's multiplying. So to get rid of it, we have to do the opposite of multiplying, which means that we're going to divide. So I'm going to divide each side by negative 3. I have to keep the sign with it because if I don't divide by negative 3, there's a negative left over, and we don't want that. Okay, so now we have a negative 3 divided by negative 3. A negative 3 divided by negative 3 is a 1, which means I can just cancel these out. What would happen is I could say that it's a 1r, but 1 times anything is itself, and so I don't actually have to write that 1, I can just write r. And then on the right side, we have 18 divided by negative 3, which gives me a negative 6. Now the variable is by itself, which means r equals negative 6 is my final answer. All right, and then let's go through just one more example. And this example is m over 4 equals 11. All right, once again, draw a line down the middle of the equal sign. Now, in this case, we want to get rid of the 4 because the 4 is on the same side as our variable m. What is the 4 doing to the m? Is it adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing? In this case, it's dividing. The reason why I know it's dividing is because it's in a fraction, and that 4 is on the bottom of the fraction. A fraction, we can read it as m over 4, or we can read it as m divided by 4. It's the same exact thing. So because I know the 4 is dividing the m, we have to do the opposite of dividing to get rid of it, which means that we're going to multiply each side by 4. All right. And then once again, it kind of works the same way as multiplying. The 4's will cancel each other out. They actually turn into 1, but anything divided by 1 is itself. So we can just leave it as m on the left side. Then on the right side, we have 11 times 4, which is 44. So my final answer is m equals 44. And there we have it, solving one-step equations.